haven't met, I'm Todd Sedano. I'm with the Palo Alto office, and I've worked with labs for 2.5 years, and I'm now in the data R&D group working on the Greenplum database. And my talk here was done while I was a PhD student at Carnegie Mellon University. I was collecting data at Pivotal and masquerading as a student at night. And this talk is Software Development Waste, the first evidence-based waste taxonomy. And my co-authors are Paul, Ralph, and Cecile Pereira. So here's our agenda today for our time together. I'm going to do a really brief history of Lean, and then I'll discuss and review the research method. I'll get into the research results. I'll compare the research results with what Lean software development has, and then have implications for us as Pivotal, and then have a conclusion. If you're curious, if you haven't read this yet, there's a software development waste paper at researchgate.com. ResearchGate is Facebook for researchers, and this paper is publicly available. You can download it whenever you want. So as we know, software development is a complex socio-technical activity. There's a lot of moving parts. We're building technical solutions, there's people building it, there's complexities with the technology, there's complexities with people interacting with one another. It's very complicated. And because of this, there's ample opportunity for waste to emerge in any project that we do, no matter how good we are at running extreme programming. And this begs the question, what are the observed wastes in software development? And for this talk, we'll define waste as any activity that consumes resources but creates no value. Now, I'm not entirely a fan of this definition. There's sort of subtle problems with the definition, but for this talk, we'll just simplify it for this. Trying to replace it with a more interesting definition is actually a talk in itself. How you define what is value, and who are you considering it from? Is it the stakeholder? Is it the client? Is it the software developer? Is it the person downloading the app? It's a very complex topic. So this is our definition for waste. And let's just start in with a brief warm-up exercise for us as a group. Turn to a neighbor and discuss a software development waste that you have personally experienced. Find a buddy and discuss this question.
Yeah. It wasn't there. Then it gets outdated, and then you rewrote it. You wrote some part, and then you used it, right?
Okay, here the conversation kind of lulling down. Maybe we got our initial wastes out of our system. Any volunteers? I'd love to hear some of the wastes that we talked about. John.
Okay, yeah. So when you have siloed knowledge, and then the person who has that knowledge is not present, you have to solve the problem in short order. You have to relearn everything that they learned.
When they leave?
Or just not available.
Oh, okay. Like they're on vacation?
Yeah. They're not answering their phone.
Cool. Any other ways? Yes.
We integrated with a service that we didn't need to integrate with, but we needed the type of data that was coming out of it. Because we weren't going to connect to it in the real life, but it had the real service hadn't been built yet.
This sounds interesting and complex. So you during development, you needed to get the type of data, so you integrated with it for later.
We replaced this integration with just copying this type of data, putting it into a map of strings.
Yeah, okay. That sounds wasteful. Okay, over here.
We built a local server to get past the firewall issue.
Oh my goodness, okay.
We knew the firewall issue would be resolved one point, but we had to work around it.
This is like, so I learned Colmac a year ago, and I feel like this is Todd's Colmac. Ah, I'm trying to talk and type at the same time, and it's really causing anxiety for me. Okay, in the corner.
I worked on a project with Maya for 18 months, 2 years, about 50 people before the company decided they wanted to go another direction and just canceled it.
Wow, I love the stacks. Change of directions. Canceled project.
There's also lots of little waste.
I'm not going to write the people hours because that would really depress me.
Yeah, I don't want to know millions.
Okay, that table? Anyways? Pre-planning. Okay. Is it the fact that it was a survey, or are you using survey as a metaphor? It's like build by committee. It's interesting because like some planning is necessary. Like when I look at our backlog and I ask a PM, like how much of this is waste? Well, they're going to say, well, I need the stories for the week, and I need to know what I'm going to be doing next week, and further on down the line, I need to know road mapping. I need to know maybe titles of stories. So there is some planning that a PM needs to do, because if we like blew through this week's story, we'd be blocked by that. But there's a point where you can take that too far. And even when we do facilitation meetings where we ask people to do a dump insert where they list out all their ideas and then maybe we put them on a 2x2 matrix and we prioritize them, we generate a lot of ideas for the purpose of culling them down to maybe 2 or 3 that we actually want to implement. So where the other 97% waste, I would say not. We needed to kind of iterate through those things very quickly. Had we solved all those problems, that might have been wasteful. Any other ways? Yes, Ross.
On a story for a while and realized that someone else already finished whatever.
Oh, okay. I want to call that duplicated work. Yeah, that makes me sad when that happens. Especially if they're faster than me. Okay, let's talk through these for a little bit here. Silo knowledge, relearning when not available. So that's the idea that so for us in Pivotal Process, we want to move the knowledge throughout the entire team as much as possible, so that if someone needs to have access to knowledge, it's there. But there's still even if everyone's on the team, there's still situations where people might be gone on vacation or out of the office for the day. We integrated with a service that we didn't need to, so that seems very wasteful. We built a local server to get past the firewall. On this one, I was kind of curious if that was something for production or not.
Yeah. I mean, just going ahead of your definition of production.
Okay. Let's try replugging in. Change of directions. The project was canceled. That's clearly wasteful in my mind. Yeah, here we go. So it's not on my screen anymore, but it's not there either. Ah, this is the connection. Oh. Okay. Is that the problem? Is Steve Wozniak in the audience and he's moving the, did you hear this story? Like he is a practical jokester and he had a RF noise creator and he would get people to move the bunny ears on the rabbits on the old televisions, and he would like throw the little button and get his friend to stand in an awkward position. Okay. Patience. Alright, so we'll try this then. If we don't get slides, I can work without them, but there's some really cool graphics I would love to steal later on. So now the projector is on. No? There we go. Okay. Don't move, Todd.
Stand right there, Doug.
Alright, we're getting back into the...
That was it. He's the money.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I don't think there's a plan B, is there? We like plug this straight into the projector? No, that's not. I do not have HDMI. Ah, maybe it is the PNY adapter.
No, don't touch it.
Thank you, John. Yeah, my backup is way in the back of the building.
That's why the other one is too.
All right, so maybe I will take this out and I'll just talk to the slides while he's getting that. Because I'd rather interact with our group here. Oh yeah, all right, so we're now in the brief history of lean. So in the where's my notes? Yes, right. So Toyota in 1945, Taiichi Ohno started removing waste from the Toyota production system. He was in charge of one of the factories, and he hated waste. Removing waste was like a passion of his. He saw it and he would get rid of it. And he became known for this in Toyota and spent the next several decades removing waste from their system. So it took them many decades to realize their dream of doing the Toyota production system everywhere in their entire flow of their materials. And he did this by doing a few things. Look at that. There's Taiichi. Hi, Taiichi. The first is he rearranged the equipment. Prior to this, all the equipment was optimized for the productivity of the equipment itself. So an operator would come to a machine, run it really fast, produce a lot of inventory. The inventory would be stored somewhere, and then move to the next machine, and it would be rerun. And he rearranged it so that the flow of the output of a machine went into the input of the next machine. And this required cross-training of everyone on the floor. So I might be in charge of 5 machines, and I might now need to learn these other disciplines to know how these other machines work, and I would just flow the material out. The second thing he did is he slowed all the machines down to the same cadence. So a factory floor would only move as fast as the slowest machine in the entire floor, and this meant that every sort of clock cycle, every takt time, all the inputs would become outputs of the next machine. At the first stage, all the inputs would become, like level 1 input outputs, and at the end of the line, a car would come out the other side. And the third thing is he's only produced material when it was needed. For him, he hated inventory. He hated this idea that people are schlepping extra inventory into a warehouse. It's sitting there, it's rusting. Now we need to have inventory management systems, and then moving that inventory back into the factory when it was needed. And this resulted in a pull system that was easy to reconfigure. It minimized inventory and had short production runs. This was so successful. So a lot of car companies were fine with their mode of operandi. And then somewhere in the 70s, there was a downturn in the economy. And Toyota did well in this. They were able to pull back their manufacturing and still do very well. And the other manufacturings were struggling. And people started looking into why Toyota was successful during this down economy. And several of the consultants observed what Toyota was doing and started popularizing these ideas to other industries. And Lean Thinking was a book written by James Womack to promote this idea that, hey, we should be removing waste in any business system. And that's fine, removing waste. These ideas were so popular in the 90s that inspired at least 2 software development cycles, the Lean software development life cycle, as well as Kanban. Now, converting and looking at the manufacturing waste, Lean decided to say, hey, we have these 7 manufacturing wastes. Let's just port them over to the software development environment and look for them as we build software. So they did this top-level translation from the manufacturing domain into the software domain. And if we look at their wastes, we have these 7 manufacturing wastes, inventory, extra processing, overproduction, transportation of goods, waiting, motion of people, defects. And then 2 consultants added an 8th and a 9th, value and non-utilized talent. And they said, hey, if we squint, we see how these map over to the field of software development. Partially done work, relearning, we talked about relearning earlier, extra features, handoffs, delays, task switching, and defects. Now, doing this sort of translation, there are 4 sort of threats to validity in adopting a taxonomy from one domain into another domain. The first is that the software development may include waste not found in manufacturing. There might be things that we do that are inherently differently wasteful than in an assembly line plant. Likewise, manufacturing might have waste that we don't have. The third is that concepts from manufacturing might bias our perception of waste in software development. There might be superficially similar things. Like, I look at manufacturing, and that looks a lot like what we do in software, but fundamentally they're different. And then the concepts in manufacturing might not fit well in software development. Namely, there might be 2 wastes in manufacturing that really should be mapped to the 1 waste in software, or vice versa. Unfortunately, in doing this adaptation, Lean software development never really showed whether any of these issues to validity would happen. They just sort of did the translation without providing evidence. And there are key differences between manufacturing and software development. In manufacturing, we're building a car, a physical product. In software, we're building an intangible thing. It's the creation of our minds. It's hard to point to it and say, here it is. In manufacturing, there are literally hundreds of steps in the final assembly of a car. In software, it's a complex process that we go through to build something. If we want another car, and then to duplicate it, if we want another car, we redo the same 100 steps and we get another car. In software, typically, it's very easy to duplicate the software. In manufacturing, often we're building batches of nearly identical goods. In software, much of it remains unique. And then the design of a car evolves very slowly. The Honda, my Honda Odyssey that I bought 7 years ago looks a lot like the Honda Odyssey that you can buy today. The outer shell looks identical from my perspective, whereas software tends to evolve much more quickly. And then more troubling is this idea of the manufacturing process, that there's this design phase that we go through and figure out what it is that we're going to build, and then we manufacture it. We go through a production phase where we take that blueprint and we do it over and over and over again, and that's where a lot of the costs are. So Toyota production system was to minimize the waste there, and they found these 7 to 9 wastes. But the question remains, are there wastes in the design phase that because they were manufacturing a product over and over again, they didn't look for in the design phase? So this led to the research method of looking at pivotal labs. We were all familiar with pivotal, and I use constructivist grounded theory. It's a much like what our designers use to actually figure out what product to build, except it's a lot more in-depth, rigorous, and there's multiple iterations on the question, what problem are we trying to solve? It takes a lot of time to do all the codings and the dump and sorts and analysis. I interviewed 33 software engineers, product designers, and product managers around the company. I collected 2.5 years of participant observation on 8 sequential projects. And then once removing waste became a theme in my research, I then collected 1 year's worth of retrospective meetings. We're familiar with the retro. There's a happy, meh, and sad column. I basically mined our meh and sad columns looking for potential waste. If we are really in a safe environment where we're venting about anything that crosses our mind, then hopefully we're venting about software development waste in these retros. For each of these topics, I wrote down what was written on the whiteboard. So in this example, the word legal was written on the whiteboard, but often that's a proxy for a conversation. And I and another pivot went through all this data, writing out what we talked about. So this is basically waiting on legal to approve legal pages. All these index cards were printed, sorted, resorted, and when interesting things happen, we would collect more data, resort, collect more data, resort, and several months later, we ended up with a waste taxonomy. And this was reinforced with additional participant observation and a lot more interviewing of product managers in particular. And this created a chain of evidence. So for everything I'm going to show you today, you can look at my dissertation, and there's large examples of each of the wastes and how we observed them at Pivotal. So here we go. Here's our waste taxonomy. Our first software development waste, building the wrong feature or product. This is the cost of not addressing the user or business needs. So user desires. This can happen from not doing enough user research or not doing it at all, or validation or testing, getting feedback and ignoring it, and working on low user value features. So one of the projects, our client said, hey, we're building this product for this persona. So we interviewed them, and we discovered that this persona did not want the product. And the client said, oh, that's fine. We told you the wrong persona. It's really this other person. They're going to use our product. So we went and interviewed those people, and they didn't want the product either. And they said, it's this third persona. They're really hard to find. You're not going to be able to interview them. Good luck. And so we tried to interview them as well, and they didn't want the product either. At the end of the day, we built it because they're the client. But there was this high risk that once delivering it, the market might not want this thing that we built. And then there's these business desires, not involving a business stakeholder or slow stakeholder feedback, unclear product priorities. Maybe the product manager isn't in the office enough, or there's someone really important that we're not giving information to. And we found that looking at these two things, in the projects I looked at, there can be a tension between what the business wants and what users want. And we saw several cases where the business desperately wanted certain features in a product that no user would ever use. And how do you resolve that tension? Lots of opportunity for waste. We have mismanaging the backlog. This is the cost of duplicating work, expediting lower user value features, or delaying necessary bug fixes. Backlog inversion. This is where the PM on Monday prioritizes the next 7 stories, And the team, for some reason, just cranks through them. And on Wednesday, starts working on stories 8, 9, and 10, which haven't been prioritized for a while. They've just been sitting in the backlog. And so we work on some random story because the PM hasn't prioritized that. So we are working on low-value stories. Duplicating work. We forget to hit the start button on our story. Someone else picks up that work. They hit start, and it's later on that we discover, like Ross did, that 4 of us have been working on the same story. And not enough ready stories. The team is sort of making up stories to keep themselves busy. Imbalance of feature work and bug fixing. We find that engineers tend to like to have a healthy balance of each. We get really depressed when there's just bug fixes after bug fixes after bug fixes, and we saw one project that purposely delayed bug fixing until the end, and then it was this onslaught of bugs, and had we fixed some of them earlier, there would have been less bugs to fix, and it was just a mess. Delaying testing or critical bug fixing. Capricious thrashing. So sometimes we gain new knowledge and we want to change what we do. So the PM, we discover something through user testing and we might resort the backlog to account for this change in priorities. That's fine. We expect things to change. Capricious thrashing is like on Monday we're going to go this way, and then when we change our mind, and nothing really new. There's no new knowledge about the marketplace. We're just changing our minds based upon the day of the week. And then working on too many features simultaneously. With a big team, you can actually start a lot of different epics and not finish any. And so it's really hard to achieve MVP. Rework is the cost of altering delivered work that should have been done correctly but was not. I think we heard one of the ways was this type of rework, where you incur technical debt or rejected stories. Maybe there's not a clear definition of done, and there's bugs and defects. You've probably seen this where a PM writes down a story. It looks kind of very clear what he means or she means. The team implements it. It's very clear that they read the story, but then the PM sees what the team did and then it gets rejected because what the PM wrote wasn't very clear. It was ambiguous and the team interpreted it a different way. And had the conversation happened earlier, we might have avoided some rework. We have the unnecessary complex solutions. This is the cost of creating a more complicated solution than necessary. It's a missed opportunity for simplifying user features, user interface, or code. So this can be at the feature level or in the technical code itself. In one project, we built a series of pages that scrolled horizontally. The user did something really complex. And then in the checkout process, we scrolled vertically. And after we launched this, several of the engineers asked the designer, well, wait a minute, why did we write all this extra navigational code to handle horizontal navigation and vertical navigation? Couldn't we have done everything as either horizontal or vertical flow? And the designer never thought of this. Neither did the team. Like, we could have saved some time simplifying that flow down. There's extraneous cognitive load. This is the cost of unneeded expenditure of mental energy. So I like this to going on a hike and taking a backpack and just putting rocks into it, just for the fun of it. There's things we can do to make our job harder. We're in a mental programming exercise, and we can like put on all these extra burdens onto ourselves to make it harder to get our job done. So there might be like a ton of technical debt in the code base, and you're trying to navigate around that technical debt, always trying to dodge it and figure out how to bolt on the bolt on to the bolt on. There could be a complex or large story. One of the teams opened up an Excel spreadsheet, a Google spreadsheet, and was literally putting in like 16 items down one axis and many columns down the other axis. And at some point, they said, hey, PM, can we simplify the business logic here? We're going to have to write so many test cases just to cover this one story. We're not sure if we're going to get it right. There's inefficient tools, problematic APIs, hard-to-use libraries, unnecessary context switching, inefficient development flow, and poorly organized code. There's the waste of psychological distress, the cost of burdening the team with unhelpful stress. Some people need some stress to perform well. There's a point where there's too much stress for the team. And we saw a team with an aggressive deadline with a number written on the whiteboard. It was the countdown to the launch of the app. And every day they would come in and the number would be one lower. And at some point the team revolted. They said, this number is causing us to have too much stress. We're making bad technical choices. We're going to erase this number and we're going to deliver a high-quality product. And that just sort of relieved the team of this distress, and they started producing really great code. There's waiting and multitasking. This is the cost of idle time, often hidden by multitasking. This can be from slow tests or unreliable tests. unreliable acceptance environments, missing information, people, or equipment, or context switching from delayed feedback. For Taiichi Ono, he thought waiting was the hardest waste to find. Because if we're smart and we're waiting, we tend to multitask onto something else. So if you observe our work environment, it's really difficult often to see waiting. We just move on to the next thing. And I felt this pain. You're working on a story, you think you're done, you hit finish, you push it off to CI, and it takes 45 minutes for that to finish. So then the question is, 45 minutes later, so what do I do? Do I wait 45 minutes? No, I'm going to be efficient. I'm going to start the next story in the backlog with my pair. And then we check 45 minutes later. If it's green, great, we move on. It's red. Oh, now what do? Do I finish what I'm working on, or do I go back and try to remember what we were doing 45 minutes, reload all that context and finish it? We have to make that decision. Probably we're going to go back, redo that. Now we have work that's in flight on a branch. Just a lot of unnecessary work had the waiting been non-existent. And I laugh at 45 minutes because now I'm onto systems that take 3 or 4 hours. You've probably heard worse stories as well. There's a waste of knowledge loss. This is the cost of reacquiring information that the team once knew from people departing the team. This is my one time in my career where I get to use the fire icon, so I'm savoring that moment. This is often from team churn or knowledge silos. We observe many teams losing or having engineers leave for a variety of reasons. And we mitigate this risk by doing a lot of practices, which I talked about a year ago right here. And finally, we have the waste of ineffective communication. This is the cost of incomplete, incorrect, misleading, inefficient, or absent communication. The team size is too large. I've seen teams of 28 engineers, 60 engineers working on a product together at Pivotal. Inefficient meetings, asynchronous communications, distributed teams can create a lot of communication waste around not communicating things clearly, not having a stakeholder present with you, depending on another team that's far away or maybe in a different time zone. And then imbalanced communication. This is the lack of empathy, dominating the conversation or not listening. And we saw a client engineer actively sort of take over every conversation they were in to the point where the engineers stopped sharing their ideas. They just let the one engineer sort of have their way. So in review, we have 9 software development wastes that are unique to the way we work. So my exercise for us is to discuss how you would find these wastes in Pivotal. So now you know 9 ways to look for. Turn to a friend and discuss how would you look for these wastes at Pivotal.
I don't know.
There might be a bunch of steps that don't necessarily have value. Are we looking for ways to detect it as it's going on to prevent it?
Detect. If you go further, that's even fantastic. Okay, maybe we can circle back as a group. Yeah, let's kind of rehash some of these conversations. So what were some of our ideas? What did people come up with?
Okay, we said just in the retro, like have a taxonomy with you to prompt the team to think about those ways.
I love it.
What do you like
You're my shield. I love it. That's where the conversation is going next. What else did we come up with? Yes.
We're not building the wrong product, actually listening to the DNF findings.
Okay. What was it?
Actually listening to the
Oh. Okay. Yes. So that sounds like a solution to one of the ways. And each of these ways have different solutions. Yes. Other ideas?
So can you analyze tracker, basically, analyze the product management tool, look for signs of stuff occurring.
Ooh.
Being, stories that go from started to unstarted.
Uh-huh.
Looking at a bunch of metadata around product management.
I've given that a lot of thought, so you and I can chat later about that. And then, of course, I started using Tracker, and there's a lot of these sort of... It's hard to get to the signal out of the noise, because there are reasons why you might start and unstart a story. But yes, I like that thinking. Any other ideas on how we could identify waste? Yes?
We talked about in IPM, if you can't agree on the story, on the pointing of the story within a certain set of minutes, that the property is too complex.
You're right. So the longer we reflect on something in an IPM is a signal that maybe the story isn't ready for us to work on.
You said in 3 minutes, that's maybe going to be hard.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So if meetings run long, what could we do? Yes. Oh, if meetings are running long, that is a sign. Yes, thank you. Any other ideas? Yes, John.
Yeah, you could run complexity metrics over the code base and see what areas show a lot of complexity. Look at the backlog.
Yeah.
And if there's upcoming stories that intersect with those parts, like you might be able to talk about waste that you could remove ahead of time.
Ooh,
Right, sure.
nice. Nice. All right. Any more? Yes.
Being aware, it's kind of like the listen to the DNF, but maybe just a general awareness of waste. And
Yeah.
not waiting for that, like calling these things out, like while you're sharing, like, are we making this too complex, or did I can? Why is that story about this one? This is the top priority in terms of what we do.
So I've noticed that a few of us have read my paper. So I was curious if reading the paper was sufficient enough to make us aware of the ways to call them. Like, did you feel like you were changing your behavior? I know there's no science behind this, but anecdotally, did you feel like reading the paper was sufficient to, or discussing the paper was sufficient to like change our behavior?
It did for me.
Okay.
It made it easier to call those things out because I had the vocabulary for it. It was sort of easier to articulate it.
Okay. I saw one more hand over here about identify.
Yeah, it's kind of to what Ross said. If you have lots of stories that take way longer than you expect, you point them at a certain amount. Basically, your pointer story is bifurcated. You have pointers, two pointers, extra two pointers, and you have a bunch of them that take way longer.
And that's conflating pointing with time.
Sure.
Complexity versus time.
Sure. So there may be something in there. There are hazards with using story points, but if we could track actual points versus estimated points, one could identify the stories where we're maybe not estimating well and figure out what was going on with that. I want to spend the remainder of our time drilling into the retro one, and you'll see why. So let me skip, see what's next in the slides. We're going to skip this whole section. And we're just going to skip this. I just wanted to read this though. So to John's point earlier, to validate the theory, one of the things we do as researchers is show it to participants, and I showed it to 7 participants to get their feedback. They all thought it was spot on. One out of the SF office said the following: "The analysis made me feel validated above all else. I felt the pain of software development waste, but didn't feel justified in expressing the negative effects of the full vigor in which I felt it. This is because I felt the waste causes seemed petty and small when thought about individually, but as I read your paper, I learned that the causes I felt fed into entire categories of waste. Now these causes don't seem petty anymore in my mind. I feel empowered to speak about them, often in retros, because they are just symptoms to bigger problems, software waste." So at Pivotal, we do use retro as a way of talking about things that are going wrong in the project. And if it's a safe environment, we talk about all sorts of different things. So one way, a couple ways to, in looking at these waste looking at the retros, I've noticed several things. One is some issues sort of just resolve themselves, that by talking about them, that's enough. The team just changes its behavior once we've sort of spoken about it. Other of them, we actually need chores or action items to actually track that they're being removed. And then some of them just take a long time to resolve. It took us a long time to get into the problem we're in. It's going to take us a long time to get out of it. So there's several ways we can look at incorporating the taxonomy into retros. One idea is that each week the facilitator can ask a waste reflection question, a question designed to have the audience pause and consider what is the waste that we're looking at for that week. The second is perhaps to schedule a waste retro to ask all the questions. That seems like a lot of work, so I want to focus mostly on 2A here. So for the cost of building the wrong feature or product, we can ask the question, are we delivering features that provide little value? Or is there a misalignment between user desires and business desires? So my call to action for us as a group is to say, hey, let's try this experiment. I'm looking for teams that are willing to try reading one of these questions once a week for a number of retros to see what happens. So if you consider, if you go into a retro, you could do the happy, mess, sad. Everyone gets on the board. Everyone sits down, but before we do dot voting, we ask one of these questions to the group, and we see what emerges. So in essence, the team has already done what they would normally do, and now we're wanting to see, does this question yield any interesting insights about what's going on for the team? And then each week you would pick a different question. For this waste, mismanaging the backlog, we might ask, was there a time when the backlog did not reflect our understanding of the most important work? Or was there a time when the backlog did not reflect the current state of what everyone was doing? You know, some anchors are very good at saying, hey, it's Wednesday morning, did everyone update tracker? Sometimes that might slide for a team. For rework, we might ask, was there rework? Did we take on these things? For unnecessary complex solutions, we might ask, could we have simplified our solutions further? Did we go far enough? For extraneous cognitive load, what slowed down our thinking? What burdens were we carrying? For psychological distress, we might ask, did you feel too much stress? For waiting or multitasking, did you experience waiting or did you experience multitasking? For knowledge loss, what knowledge is not shared? I kind of like this question because it looks into the future. When someone leaves a team, it's hard to recapture that knowledge, but we could be asking ourselves, 1 week, what knowledge are we not sharing among the team members? What was I working on this week that was not communicated out to everyone else? Ineffective communication. Did we experience ineffective meetings or ineffective communication? So my call to action for us, so I'd love for this taxonomy to incorporate into lean software development. I would love to try this taxonomy in retros, and I'm looking for teams that are willing to experiment with me. And then for agile coaches, they can use these in their meetings with their coaches. So in conclusion, we have the first evidence-based waste taxonomy. The paper gets into this. It supports parts of lean software development waste, but it differs in key ways. And it enables us to look for hidden wastes. So let's start looking for them. In manufacturing, there were 7 ways focused around physical products. In software development, there are 9 ways focused around an intangible product. While looking at manufacturing for software development was helpful for a key period of time, And same thing with construction. I hope that as an industry, we stop looking at other industries to figure out how we should build software. Manufacturing, construction has saddled us with some unhelpful concepts that are not serving our industry very well. And then for Pivotal, software development remains a complex social technical activity. Even for a company like us that's been removing waste actively for decades, there's still ways for us to experience and find. We already talked about the paper. I'm working on a book about the way we write software. If you're interested in learning more about that, you can either email me or sign up there. And that is the end of the presentation. Thank you. Questions and discussion. Yes, John.
You touched on this lately that that the focus of the Toyota Way was about production, the production phase, and that there's this design phase, and then you didn't talk much about that. And the design is folded into production in some respects.
Yeah.
Actually, in huge ways, right? Software. So, can you add anything? Can you elaborate a little bit on what the source of waste that come from design?
So that question mark in the upper right, what are there? So I specifically didn't dive into that because a corollary question is, now that we know software development waste, are there wastes here that could be then applied into the manufacturing domain? And there's these mapping concerns that we have. So I'd rather focus just entirely on software and say, we know how to build software. These wastes are although they're specific to Pivotal, we felt them in almost every company I've been at. When was the last time I didn't feel stress at a company or a solution was too complex? These are kind of universal software industry wastes. And given the way we build software, they resonate with us, right? We're spending a lot of time thinking. So if something is burdening us, it may affect our output. Now, there might be exceptions. So if I was in a software company that literally everything I did today was identical to the thing I did yesterday and the thing I'm going to do tomorrow, like the stories were like just cookie cutter stories, then you might see some aspects of configuration waste or something like that. Like, why aren't we automating the system? But that's not the typical experience for us as pivots. Other questions or discussion items? Yes?
It seemed like there was a running theme across all 9 areas of implementation. Like, I noticed, like, working with Pivotal, there's a lot of empowerment of very different, there's still a research over time. Do you think that reinstilling, like, the concepts of, like, team ownership and balanced team that help develop across the job description or even just your other care is a way to help? It seems like those are just tangible outputs of that one moving problem, which is I can't speak up at the time that I experience that void.
I'm trying to do that. So what I really heard you say is you're feeling impressed by this empowering of the team and the empathy we have for one another. You also felt that a lot of these things were related to communication. And I was kind of going through my list of 9 to see which ones weren't. Because I feel like some of them are beyond communication, like the building the wrong thing.
I still like this, that's like being able to say, I'm building this feature, but it doesn't fit in with the rest of the feature set. Like, even if I'm a product manager trying to write that story, or if I'm a developer actually developing the story, I'll survey in my end and say, that's odd. Like, is this really what we want to do?
It's almost like there's like a meta level of waste. The waste that occurs when you're not able to raise your hand and identify the waste that's occurring.
Yeah.
So at Pivotal, we have all these feedback loops. We have daily stand-ups, we do TDD, we have weekly retros, and it's one of our ways of identifying and removing waste. We want tight feedback loops. And the question that happens is, what happens when those feedback loops go wrong? And one of my first sortings of the waste taxonomy, I had broken feedback loops as this entire category. And the more we looked at the tension between that and everything else we were doing, we realized that really they were special cases of all these 9 wastes. So we blew apart that category and put the index cards in all the other wastes. But if our feedback loops are broken, then we might not be seeing these wastes as quickly as we do.
That's good. I think that on the 9 episodes, particular engineers questioning product decisions as being maybe in the spirit of that. That's the backlog would reflect what our current priorities are. hasn't really validated that this sure is important how to validate that can be not as productive as you would like. And
Yeah.
especially if that's seen as an important to like, well, of course it is. I'd be saying I'm not doing my job right as a product manager or designer. What do you mean by asking that question?
I think what you're getting at is we can question the PM and the backlog in such a way, in the guise of looking for waste, perhaps in a way that's unhelpful for the project. I've seen that, right? I've observed, and some of it's welcome. Like a PM would want, and I've worked with designers who want our input. Like they're like, as engineers, we're the first users of the product. I want to know how the product works for you, because if it's not going to work for you, the person who wrote the software, how's it going to work for anyone else? But there's a limit to that, and this is why we have a product designer, because we are not the end users of the system. If we use ourselves as a benchmark, we end up in the inmates are running the asylum problem. So I don't have a great answer to that, but I would be cautious about using the waste as like this 2x4 to beat up the PM.
I think what I'm getting at is more the latter, that depending on the personalities and how well the team communicates or not, that question or even if very well intentioned can also go wrong, where if this is not comfortable for the team to actually be engaging with engineers on questions about product.
Yeah. Ross.
I was wondering if you thought at all about how to quantify this. For example, I'd love to be able to say,
Yeah.
okay, we've kind of reached this level at which we need to make the test suite faster because
Yeah.
we've reached a quantity that, is slowing us down by X factor, right? Now that we've done this, I can show you the measurable output
Yeah.
of doing this work to kind of address the problems. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I've purposely avoided that.
Okay.
Because it's very hard to measure and very hard to quantify waste. So now that we have a waste taxonomy, and if we agree upon this, we could look at any individual waste and say, how expensive is this? But something like a slow test suite, I was on a project where, because the build went down, we had engineers waiting up to 4 hours a day to get work done. And management did not care. And that was a pivotal client. We would twiddle our thumbs and build origami while we were waiting for it. And we got feedback saying, well, they think you prefer building origami over writing code. So we were trying to quantify it through a visible product, this origami, to illustrate how much waste there was. And the client did not understand that. They couldn't, it wasn't working. We then tried red balloons. We would put up red balloons whenever the build was broken, and we were blocked on submitting code because of the flaky test suite. And it was like a 2-hour test suite, and basically you got like four or five windows of opportunity to get code in the repo every day. And you would lose half of those if it was red. So lots of waste. Yes, did I see a hand? No, that was a Coke.
I have one more last question.
Yeah.
I really like that you work with the retros. I think it's great that you have tangible evidence for these type of ways. It's similar to what I said earlier. I wonder what type of ways are hiding that never surface in retros. Because retros have a certain format and have a certain kind of questions.
I was really worried about that too. I'm interrupting. I was really worried about that too. But through the participant observation and the interviews, I became less worried about that. And what was really interesting to see is how well the retros spoke for the things I observed. And there, if you look at the dissertation, there may be like 4 or 5 line items that are from participant observation that were not directly revealed from a retro. So in the teams I observed, we've done a great job of creating safe environments where we talk about the things that are going wrong. Hopefully that's the same here. But yes.
I think it is. It's also, there are certain things that you don't talk about, right? That's not to do with the same environment. I would in a vendor say, why are you using Java? That's not a right question. Because that's already a done deal when you come into a project that's there. And it might be incredibly wasteful to use Java for this project. If I would think about it at all, I'd talk to the PM at one point and would actually say, hey, have you guys thought about changing that?
Yeah, the irony is we do complain about ineffective tools and technologies and APIs, and that did come up a lot. And I think there was like 100 cards just on all this, and some of it we were stuck with. The client is using this arcane security mechanism. It's in the DMZ, and they haven't upgraded it in 10 years, and you have to use it. And it takes, 80 hours of engineering effort to do something that should be dirt simple. But we have to do that because we cannot change, we have no power over changing the DMZ. I'm looking for guidance about food.
I'll step forward. I just inquired again, and Maria has been on the phone continuously over the last hour, and they're still not here. So after this wonderful, wonderful talk, you will get treated to no food. But it's coming. The driver says he's right here, but, well, he's not here. So we don't know. Yeah, I mean, you can answer a couple more questions. We've never had this happen before, so I don't know what to do. Maybe give you first a hand of applause. Yeah. Just thank you.